I really don't remember why I called this section technology as opposed to just software, but here we are. The clock has struck midnight, and it is time for the final element of music production. We're going to be covering 3 things here: virtual instruments and effects, specifically where to get them, that thing that makes us special, the Pony Preservation Project, all credit to autists who aren't me, by the way, and utility software such as YouTube DL and ffmpeg. This slide has information on some websites where you can get free virtual instruments, namely bedroomproducersblog.com and vstbuzz.com. Both websites host a wide range of freebies, as well as news on deals from plugin websites if you want to purchase plugins legally. If you don't care about that, then ask around. Now, there are a few other ways that you can get freebies from time to time or under particular circumstances. For example, some plugin vendors may put some plugins up for free as part of a limited offer from time to time, most likely to encourage you to compulsively check their websites. For example, I got Isotope's Ozone Elements for free as part of a limited offer, and I also know that Native Instruments' Hybrid Keys instrument was offered for free at the same time. If you're considering purchasing musical hardware from a place that isn't eBay, note that some hardware manufacturers actually like to bundle some software with your purchase. Now, some of them bundle DAWs like Ableton Live Lite or Pro Tools First, which actually has been discontinued, but in my experience, the DAWs that are bundled with hardware are usually like extremely restricted versions of the actual DAWs that are just basically designed to get you to buy the real thing. But some of them are actually nice, so if you'll excuse the shilling, my purchase of the Focusrite Solo Audio Interface came with the Softtube Drummer S73 Intelligent Master Processor, essentially a glorified multiband compressor that I've developed a habit of putting on a lot of things in my mixes. Now, in terms of my favorite legally free plugins, I would suggest Native Instruments Complete Start, which has a nice bass synth called the TRK-01 bass synth, a tube compressor called Supercharger, which you have to get because of the meme, right? And some nice preset sounds from the Analog Dreams and Hybrid Keys instruments. Of course, I have to mention Vital Synth, a free wavetable synth, which is probably the most powerful free synth, like ever, with the caveat that it seems to be extremely CPU intensive. If for some reason your DAW doesn't come pre-bundled with basic effects, you may want to look into the Replugs VST FX suite. These are the same plugins that are used in the Reaper DAW, but you could use them anywhere. It'll provide all of the basic effects that you'll need, and more, all with a no-nonsense UI. In the same vein, Melda Production offers a wide range of free effects, including M-Auto Pitch, one of the few free pitch correction plugins out there. For more acoustic sounds, you may want to take a look at the Spitfire Labs instrument, for which you can download a lot of great free sampled sounds. Okay, that's enough shilling for music software companies. Time to talk about something that's a little bit less corporate, the Pony Preservation Project. The 2 pieces of the PPP that mostly feature in my work are 15.ai for generating dialogue and TalkNet for generating singing. Now, in delivering the following information, I'm going to assume that most people watching this already have a baseline level of familiarity with the PPP and how to use its various tools. One reason for this is because the PPP have their own panel, and you should check it out. But secondly, in my opinion, the documentation included with these tools is adequate enough that most people should be able to get up and running without a dedicated video tutorial. In other words, if you have no idea what the PPP is about or if you've never used any of the tools, this section might not be that useful to you. Now I'm going to provide a basic overview of how I use these tools, as well as a few tips and caveats that I've run into while trying to use them. So the way I use 15.ai is I simply write out a script beforehand, and then I generate my script using 15.py, my special in-house read-evaluate print loop that lets me generate and download sounds entirely using my keyboard, without even having to go to the 15.ai website. I made this thing so long ago that frankly I don't remember how it works. I don't remember all of the bugs that were associated with it, but if I had to make it again, I would make some kind of GUI or even a TUI program that's still keyboard operable, but also has the additional benefit of allowing you to queue multiple requests in parallel, so you can continue to generate while you're reviewing lines to figure out which ones to keep and which ones to throw out. But now let's talk about generating lines. If the pronunciation of words is off, your number one go-to is Arpabet. If the prosody is off, there are multiple options. One thing that you can try to do is alter the length of the sentence that you're generating. I find that shorter lines are generally more emotive. Another solution that you can use is splitting your line into multiple segments and generating those different segments to stitch them together. But in practice, I find it's very difficult to get two independently generated segments to stitch well together. Another thing you can do is use the emotional contextualizer feature. In my opinion, I haven't really found a reliable relation between the line used for emotional contextualization and the actual emotion or delivery of the line itself. But it is possible to use the contextualizer to get a different result. As you can see, a lot of this is just trial and error. Another thing you can do is use punctuation creatively. Of course, you can use commas, periods, exclamation marks, and question marks, but you don't have to use punctuation in the way that it's used in English. You can also try mixing and matching different punctuation marks, like you mix and matched your vaccines. I also find that some characters are less emotive than others. More recent iterations of the model seem to have some issue with Twilight Sparkle in this area. Another thing that you can do is if you can't get the AI to generate the line in a way that you want, you can try to tune the script to the tone that the AI is going for. In other words, work with the AI, not against it. In terms of a few miscellaneous tricks, I found in some cases that it's possible to extend vowel sounds using H.
What a shock. What a shock.
Also, you may recall that it's possible to get these sounds. As I generate all of my lines, they are saved in a folder dedicated to my project. When I go to edit the lines and incorporate them into the song or skit, I'm either cutting noises through manual editing or using noise gating. I find that the voices generated by 15.ai don't need too much mucking with in terms of EQ, so I don't really have a set of EQ recommendations across the board, but sometimes I use EQ to remove some harshness or boxiness from the lines. I also find that these voices can benefit from a little bit of compression for intelligibility. Now let's talk about what I do with TalkNet. What I like to do is write out my lyrics, and then I maintain a second version of the lyrics based on that. The second version of the lyrics is for holding fixes to pronunciation errors. Unlike 15.ai, TalkNet is deterministic, so you can't just regenerate your line in hopes of getting a new line without an error if you encounter one. Now, if you have the hardware to run TalkNet locally, I highly recommend it. You can find the link to the offline installer in the PPP main doc. The reasons that I recommend you run locally are as follows. There are a lot of small obstacles that can get in your way when you try to use Colab. For instance, Colab will error out if you try to upload too many files at once. Not a problem if you're running on your local machine. Colab is subject to timeouts. It's not if you're running on your local machine. And there's about 12 minutes of overhead that you encounter when you have to re-download all the files you need to run TalkNet when you first go to set it up on Colab. Not the case on your local machine. Because there's so much overhead involved here, running TalkNet on Colab is really not conducive to just dropping in and fixing a single error. Now, when generating TalkNet vocals, I take heavy advantage of the vocal doubling technique. What this is a common technique used in actual popular music, but it usually sounds much better in pop music than when I do it. Essentially, you record and generate two versions of the same line, and then pan them off to two sides of the mix. One reason that people do this is to add some width to the vocals. But the second reason that I do it that has more to do with TalkNet itself is that the AI is accurate but not precise. It can get around the right place with a given line, but it still craps out from time to time. So I try to average out the error from generation using vocal doubling. When writing a melody, it can be helpful to do a sanity check by generating a few mock lines first. The reason that this is a good idea is that if your melody goes outside the vocal range that the model can handle, the AI can start detecting the wrong octave, which can result in weird things happening in the generated audio. If you do a mock-up and the AI starts generating in the wrong octave, that might be a sign that you need to go and change the melody. It's been suggested that one thing that you could do in this case is use the change input pitch function in order to shift the melody into a more tolerable range for the AI, and then readjusting the pitch in post. In practice, I found that this is rarely feasible. In fact, I think there is even an example of this in Pi Day that resulted in some weirdness in the final product that I'm really not happy with. Another thing to note when writing out your melody is that the AI tends to struggle with sustained notes. I've heard from some Anons that you can make multiple generations of these sustained notes and stitch together only the good parts. Sounds plausible, but personally I haven't tried this, so the way this goes is essentially I do a source audio mockup where I record every line that I need in the DAW first, and place it and edit it as though my vocals are the ones that are going to go into the final mix. From my DAW interface, what I can then do is split my audio and render it out into logical segments that I can then feed into TalkNet. Typically, this will be a verse, a chorus, maybe half a verse. My recommendation for the duration of each of these segments is that they should be less than a minute, and ideally around 30 seconds just to be safe. The reason that you care about duration is trying to process clips that are too long can result in you running out of RAM. As I'm rendering out my audio, I'm also relabeling it so I know what goes where. I like to use a song letter number system, where the song is a tag that tells me what song the file is for, the letter denotes the vocal track, and the number denotes the order of the clips. Sometimes I'm not just generating a double, I may have 2 or 4 tracks of backing vocals as well. When recording audio, one thing I've noticed is that the quality of the source audio is actually important for getting proper generations. Unfortunately, TalkNet is not really a substitute for singing or articulating words correctly. Any kind of screw-ups or noises you make in your recording have a good chance of introducing similar screw-ups into generated audio. Another thing that you want to do is avoid clipping. When you're generating audio, unless you have an absolute monster of a setup at home, it uses a significant amount of your computing resources. If you're running anything else that's GPU intensive in the background, it's going to take significantly longer. If you're running anything else that uses a lot of GPU memory, you might end up running out of memory. In terms of the auto-tune setting for generation options, I used to use this more in the past because I found that it helped a little bit with intonation, but there are some caveats with it that ultimately make it my recommendation to avoid using it. Firstly, the auto-tune setting seems to introduce some sort of volume normalization to the clip. So immediately you're starting out with a clip whose volume is not comparable to that of clips generated without the autotune setting on. In addition, sometimes if the pitch detection detects the wrong octave, the autotune setting can really screw up your vocals. Always listen to the entire clip after generation, because weird shit can happen throughout the entire clip, even at the very end. In terms of models, I try to stay away from the rarity model, given that it's based on talking data instead of singing data, which is unfortunate. Here are a few tips for fixing pronunciations. Firstly, apostrophes, contracted words, alternate spellings, or weird punctuation can all confuse the model. One thing that you'll notice in my cover of Sinking Ships, again, contracted words can be trouble spots. Sometimes in the chorus, Rainbow Dash just says V instead of U. Can't unhear syndrome. In some cases, inserting a space between 2 different syllables of a word, whether it be spelled out or in alphabet, can assist in pronunciation. Furthermore, in cases where the AI accidentally interprets a noise as an actual syllable, sometimes you can remedy this by adding what I call fudge syllables into your generation text. After I've got my lines generated, I do my best to edit out weird noises. I do find that TalkNet is quite good at replicating noises in my recording. I also have some general recommendations for EQ. Unlike with 15.ai, I do find that there is one piece of advice that is generally applicable to TalkNet voices. The generated voices seem to be a little heavy in the 1 to 1.5K range. In my opinion, it's best to introduce a broad cut at around 1 to 1.5K. Other things I will do are, again, introducing compression for intelligibility. Sometimes I will use a de-esser to take a little bit of the harshness out of the voices. I also find that the AI has a serious tendency to magnify any pitch errors in the original recording. I still haven't decided if it's best to pitch correct before or after the recording, but I usually do some form of pitch correction, and this can take the form of manually adjusting the pitch of clips, using some kind of autotune, whether it be with a free plugin like M-Auto-Pitch or Auburn Graillon, or paid alternatives like Wavestune or Antara's Autotune, and of course for those of you who can afford it or acquire it through other means, Melodyne, the standard in pitch correction. Now let's go to the 2 dreaded command line tools, YouTube DL and ffmpeg. YouTube DL is generally the fastest way to rip audio from most websites, including YouTube and freesound.org. All you gotta do is install YouTube DL and type this command into your command prompt or terminal, and suddenly you have a WAV file of whatever you were just listening to work with. Isn't that amazing? ffmpeg is a command line utility that allows you to re-encode your audio into different formats. It actually also works on videos too, but here we're just focusing on audio. The way I like to use ffmpeg these days is I'll use my DAW to render my tracks to WAV. That is an uncompressed format that's very easy for software to read. And then I'll use ffmpeg to convert that WAV file to a lower quality MP3 for streaming, because I find that MP3 is the most widely supported music format, or FLAC for album distribution. With certain quality settings, MP3 compression isn't supposed to be noticeable, but sometimes I feel like I can feel it anyways. So for my sanity, I like to use lossless compression on the version of the tracks that ends up in the mega download for the albums. To actually use ffmpeg, all you gotta do is install it and type something like that into your command prompt or terminal. Listed on this slide is the ffmpeg command that will give you the highest quality for transcoding to MP3. And that's it. That is the end of the elements of music production. Now it is time to get into the demo Pi Day. See you next time.